people-driven change,
civic engagement.
social accountability.
Welcome to Stawi Podcast. Hello, viewers, and welcome to Stawi Podcast. My name is Leocadia Gaudentia. We've had quite an eventful week. There's a lot that has happened. And with me in studio is Gibson Gisore, who's going to shed some light on the events that have been going on. So, Gibson, welcome.
Thank you, Adesha.
Um, Tell us more about you. What do you do?
Okay, thank you for inviting me for this particular show. My name is Gibson Gisore, as you have indicated. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I'm a law lecturer. I'm also deal with these things to do with human rights activism and a political analyst. Yes.
Oh, where do you
Yes.
lecture?
I teach at Kenyatta University.
School of Law at Parklands.
Yes, at Parklands, yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
So, did you go to Kamukunji yesterday?
Unfortunately not. Unfortunately not.
But
I
you'd
was
have
tied up
loved to
in
go.
town. Given that I was to be free, I could, but I was following what was happening there closely.
Okay.
Yes.
Was it a consultative meeting per se, or was it like leaders telling people what they should do? Or was it people driven? Like, is it the people who are telling leaders that this is what you want? Was it a listening party for the leaders?
It was not a listening party. I mean, I think you can attest to that, given that I don't think there's any point these people went to consult the Mwananchi. All they do is maybe listen to the advisors and those people who are close to them, and they formulate the agenda of the meeting, which I think Raila Baba came back and was trying to highlight on that. From my own perspective, I don't know whether this is really helping, because every time he goes out, he wants to come back with some kind of euphoria. We've seen that every other time he gets out of the country, he extends his trip, even if it was a 2-day or 3-day. He extends it for a week, like a week or two, then comes back with a bang, which to some extent gets to bring some new agenda, sets the pace politically for some time. And I think that is his political journey, and that is his political style. You got to give it to him that he has a way of pushing government. And I think this is the right time. He thought that when the finance bill, having gone through this whole process of very meticulous debate about the Finance Act, which was then the finance bill, now it's a finance act. This is the right time to touch the souls and hearts of Kenyans, and then you find your way in there and tell them that I'm still the one speaking to your issues. I'm still the one who is the custodian of your interests. And with that, then, politics is about winning numbers. It's like the ministry, the religious ministry, where you win souls for Christ. Politics, you win souls and hearts for yourself.
True.
Yes.
Considering that this was meant to be a public participation on the currently Finance Act, how relevant was it? Like, is public participation not meant to be the first thing that happens? Like, when we have the deliberations and all that before it even gets to the parliament. So, how relevant was it after the bill is already an act?
I guess it was relevant to them, not in regards to the finance bill, because I mean that would be like closing the stub while the horse has bolted. I think it's relevant to them politically, so they are trying to set a separate agenda. Even in parliament, I think I didn't quite see the kind of opposition which I could have expected from the opposition. I would want to say I was a bit disappointed, because they promised a lot of fight, but I didn't see any, except for some individual politicians who went out of their way to present some some objection or give a counter story to some of the clauses which I thought were punitive to Kenyans. As a group, as a group of Azimio, the way they were, even the voting happened, you could see some kind of reluctance, some kind of indolence, which was not the case with the government side, that is the Kenya Kwanza side. And I think at some point I'm convinced that they could have been speaking from both sides of the mouth, in that you could realize that there was some very disorganized approach towards even the Kenya Kwanza side was actually throwing chips at them and telling them, if you are feeling that this finance bill is not the best, where's your where's your counter alternative, which we could maybe look at and be able to debate on that? And then nobody came up with anything. So that showed that they were not an organized side as we could have expected them to.
When you needed them to be,
Yes, yes. They dropped the ball on us.
sadly.
Yes.
Baba gave some recommendations on how to, is it evade tax or avoid tax? He wants you guys to to be carpooling so that you don't spend on petrol and diesel. He wants matatus to feel excessively okay, and a few other things to just ensure that you're not paying taxes as required. What will he do to the tax that is cut before the money gets to you at the end of the month and all that? And do you think that the recommendations is giving on avoiding the using of diesel and petrol as something that would ensure that people don't pay taxes?
If he pulls through with his program, if Kenyans indeed follow through with what he's saying, then there's going to be a major dent on the government tax, because if you drive around, you can attest that the amount of money you pay to per liter of petrol or diesel, around 68 or 70%, I'm not sure of the percentage, but it should be above 50%, goes to the government. There are all sorts of levies under that particular liter of petrol which you buy. So, and then there's also even inflation, and there's also the US exchange dollar. I mean, it's really a lot which goes into that, which counts as revenue for the government. So if people are going to start carpooling, I mean, a car can carry five people. So if should be five vehicles which we should have been on the road, then it's only one. If matatus are going to fill and carry the double the size, it means there is one vehicle which has not been able to consume fuel for that day, which is revenue which is essentially lost to the government. So the government must be able to deal with whatever suggestions that Raila is trying to put across with a pinch of salt, and be able to actually be able to ask him, why are you doing this? Because the government is not crazy, much as that we feel that the weight of government is becoming too much on Mwananchi. From my own perspective, government is not crazy, because we are in a very tight spot, with the debt which we have accrued, which is huge and which has to be paid. So if government does not collect these revenues to be able to expend it towards satisfying the debt as agreed, then we are likely to have a very big problem. I don't know. Jimmy Wanjigi came up, I think, a week or two back, with very interesting scenarios of the situation in which we are in as a country. If we, and I thought that was a joke till I asked one of the members of parliament, who is apparently from the Kenya Kwanza side, and he told me it's not a lie. That's the kind of situation we are. If you actually listen to Jimmy Wanjigi, then you know that we are facing a serious problem in the near future. So we need to do everything within our power to ensure. So we will want to trust and believe that whatever tax the government is collecting should be able to use it judiciously towards satisfying the debt first. Then secondly, to be able to pay these internal debts, especially these ones, the debt owed to people who have supplied, which is called now the pending bills. If they could be able to be paid, then a lot of money could be able to be circulating around, so that people can have money in their pockets. If government does not spend, then there is not much money in circulation. So if Baba pulls through with these plans, and Kenyans are, when things become tough, then it gives room for now magendo business to start, people to start looking for ways of avoiding to pay tax, and that does not augur well, because Kibaki came with a slogan and said that kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. Now Baba is trying to undo that, and that poses a huge danger to government, and government needs to look at what Baba is suggesting and be able to tell him whether they sit on a round table and be able to discuss on the way forward, because I think for him, he's trying to gather political mileage as well as recover the lost ground. Governments are always unpopular, but the best way when you're outside is to make them more unpopular so that you can show up your numbers. Once they are up, then when it's 2027, you wouldn't have challenges telling people that, these are the people who are taxing you. These are the Sakayos who are telling you now it's time we do away with them.
Have you gone through the Act? And if you've gone through the Finance Act, which particular sections do you feel like they're punitive to the people?
Pretty much a lot of things are very punitive, but as I've explained earlier, is that some of these things we just have to bear with them because we're also in a very tight spot as a nation, and then we need some of the monies to also do one or two things. We need to give this government some time and see, this is their first budget. We see whether they can be able to do something for a change, because it's a new government. We need to see the new policies take effect so that we know whether they are helping or there is a change for the better or for the worse. That is the kind of leverage or latitude I can be able to extend to them. Secondly, is there are issues to do with the famous housing tax. That as a lawyer, and I think I've indicated that in other places, in other forums, that I feel we're jumping in too quick. The best way could have been we come up with a legislation which of course is going to govern this whole process, which legislation does not exist, as because we had the National Housing Corporation. They are not going to use the National Housing Corporation. We had the Uru system, which was doing houses, which we can see. I mean, they said that that is not a workable plan for them. Now they're trying to come up with a new model. This model is not known to anybody as yet. There is the Ministry of Housing, but as between you and me, when, when ministries are in charge, what happens, and this is a lot of money. So the tax, the housing, the finance bill does talk about that once this finance bill has passed, then it gives powers to the housing minister to go and come up with a bill on how to use the money. Why give the minister money first and then tell him look for ways on how to spend it? I mean, that will give room for a lot of mischief. I want to believe that if there is a way we could be able to maybe put a stop to this, have the legislation in place, let it go through the public participation. Let's all understand what is this concept. How am I going to get a house? How am I not going to get a house? Once that is clear to Kenyans, then you can start now uh, enforcing this particular tax. That is all I can say. So that is, I think, a gray area which we need to look at. There are a couple of other things which, when you look at like the changing of the petroleum tax to from 8 to 16%, that becomes indeed very punitive. The president brought to power with the promise that he's going to reverse the prices of oil, which were trading at around 158 or 160 thereabout. Now we are doing 182 or thereabout. So if you increase this, we're going to go past 200. So that is going to be very costly for every Kenyan, not only for the driving people. Fares are going to go up, the transportation cost is going to go up, everything literally which Kenyans use is going to go up. And of course, the economy is one which has taken a beating. When you add this to fees, nowadays schools do demand fees up front when the schools open. You realize that there's nobody who has had a salary hike to cover all these loopholes. So Kenyans are going to really suffer. Those are some of the sections which I feel if if we were to maybe moderate or look around, we could be able to. But then again, from with my small research, I've realized that government also is at a bend. It's on a fix. Some of these conditions are not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
They have been driven down their throat by the people whom we owe money. Like the IMF keeps reviewing whatever, how we expend our taxes, how we collect our taxes, and does recommend such. The issue of the 16% is something which has been pushed over time from around 2017. That ought to have been fixed, or I've had, but then I think in the last budget we had to agree to disagree that let's have it at half at 8, but then this time we don't have an excuse as yet. So it's a continuity of government. You got to own up and then be able to find a way of fixing it. So it's going to be painful, but let's hope that the government has a plan of getting out of this problem we are in.
True. Back to the housing thing.
Mm.
Do you feel like the national government is overstepping its mandate, considering that housing is a devolved function?
Uh, I wouldn't really say that because this is a program which I would want to believe, because I've had the advantage of going to other countries and I've seen how that can be a very good program.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you leave it, I always had a challenge the way we are going about coming up with our development. I mean, if you live around Nairobi, you want to go to Kitengela, you want to go to Rongai. Those people do not have a national sewer system. Like in Kitengela, you will hardly find a government hospital. You will hardly find a school or a stadium, land for stadium. But apparently for police station now, that one is. Those are basically the only government services which are within reach. So if we look at things from that perspective, we need government to also take advantage. For example, Eastlands, most of Eastlands came up through government housing. If we can be able to embrace that and be able to set the standard of the kind of houses to be built, and it's only government which can be able to do large numbers of houses or housing. The private
Mm-hmm.
sector can only do, because it's individuals and companies, they can only do that which they can, which is not sufficient. There has been a cry from time immemorial that we have a housing deficit. So this is the government jumping into the fray. As you have put it, that it's a devolved function, it's something which we could look at from a different perspective and be able to devolve monies to the counties to do housing. But then you get to realize where we are. Even the medical, which essentially is supposed to be devolved,
Mm-hmm.
the doctors were sent away to be employed by the counties, but they have never been paid. They have always been on strike. So if national government takes this cue and then we get to set the pace of how we do this, we have sufficient infrastructure, uh, housing systems whereby we have very efficient roads, we have very efficient ways of clearing our waste, and
Mm-hmm.
then of course schools and hospitals, then we get to consider ourselves a developed economy, because there's no economy which develops and looks like Kenya. I mean, with towns like Rongai and the likes, we are likely not to go so far unless we want to be a failed state.
True. The other concern about the housing is, we have counties that are majorly the food basket of Kenya. And there's a feeling that if we set up the houses, it reduces the agricultural part. So, what do you think?
Yes, that has been a concern, but it shouldn't be. Now that my prayer is that if the government has really gotten into the business of doing houses,
Mhm.
then let's see a semblance of a clear roadmap whereby we decide that even if it's your own plot, you're building a 50 by 100, and I don't know where people settled on the 50 by 100. I would rather we do maybe 100 by 100, whereby your house should be able to take a certain percentage, or your building section should be able to take a certain, and then the rest of the section should be green, so
Mhm.
that we give room to people planting trees within their own compound, to also increase the green cover within the cities. so that we don't end up in a situation in which we have in Beijing, which they are trying to reverse, where you wake up every morning, it's smog. You see, there's the morning dew, which you see, but for them, it's smog, real serious smog, which is composed of various emissions from the industries. And if we can be able to look at it from that perspective, then we get to set a particular agenda. Rwanda has really done a very nice job. From the first time I went to Rwanda in 2008, then I followed back in 2012, 2013, and then recently I was there. You see serious development of in a country where essentially nothing was existing. It had been written off after 1994 civil war, which they had within themselves. So we need to also set a particular agenda when leadership takes charge from the top leadership, that we get to see things to follow a certain path, which we can be able to have trust and faith in, that each Kenyan gets decent accommodation, because that's the responsibility of government to implement a constitution, because that's part of our constitution, is not even anything else outside. So, so if we can be serious, then we can be able to have some serious steps towards that.
Do you think, okay, do you think that strengthening economic blocks would be a way of the government, like increasing the tax base? Like if we have the Lake Region Economic Block, the other one in Central, I don't know what it's called. Like it's strengthened. We have like industries and everything, which will create employment, and we can actually start exports. Okay, not like exports are not there, but increase our exports and everything. Do you think that would be an alternative to increase the taxes?
I wouldn't even say that it's an. Thank you for that question, because recently I was having a debate with a certain member of parliament whom I was trying to challenge and tell him, look here, you people are doing these things as if you don't know what it is that you are doing. You cannot talk of taxing Kenyans. Taxing Kenyans, the only modus of making money or changing this economy. Look at the policies which Kibaki will lay. I think Kibaki is the only man in this country who understood the Kenyan economy and had the architecture of where we want to move and go, and he had the plan. So look at what Kibaki had suggested in the Vision 2030. It's not driven anything away. It's actually in the Vision 2030 that we need to have export promotion centers around the country. He has suggested one in Kitale, one in Kisii, one in Meru. Mombasa they exist, and Nairobi they exist, but they could be revamped, and then one in Naivasha, and then a couple of other towns where the population has also risen and people need jobs. So this could have been the best modus which we could have used to skyrocket our country to wherever it is that we went. Because if you engage in export promotion zones, people will be getting jobs. Those centers employ thousands of people. They get to also pull investors who come in with a lot of money. Once they set up, there's the raw materials which are extracted from the localities. Once these raw materials are prepared and they are ready for export, we set up various centers of export. For example, we have the infrastructure to do with airports, things which got to be carried in the airport, then let that be done. Once we do that, we maybe connect the railways to all these centers and then make these town cities. With that, you don't need to tax Kenyans through the nose to make money, because there will be Kenyans will not care what amount of tax you want to collect from them, because every Kenyan, even in the local community, will be able to access an airport, be able to access a railway, to be able to access a good road to whatever place he wants to go. Then second, they know whatever they are doing, whatever small farming, even if it's small scale, even if it's half an acre, you can be able to plant vegetables there, which you know you will be able to sell in the evening. Then the next 8 hours they will be in Europe, and then in the next evening you will be expecting your money back in euros, not in Kenyan currency, and this will really change your status. So if we were be able to look at these things, because that is what Kibaki looked at and said, now we need to export more, I'm not hearing any government talk of export.
Mm-hmm.
If we can be able to have light industries which we can make things which you can be able to export, put them in the plane in 8 hours, in 7 hours, in 6 hours, they are in Europe, or in 10, 15 hours, they are in the US. Now that we have already signed the economic partnership agreement with the European Union, which has been lagging for the last 7 or so years since the last one elapsed, because we were trying to face it as a common bloc as the East African community. But then I think the other countries, since they don't export much to Europe, they have refused to append their signature. So Kenya was the only country which was suffering more. And I think they enjoyed it that way, because when you can be able to pull down your brother for something, so that you can also find chance to rise and get where they are, then so be it.
Makes you happy.
So I'm happy that that was signed, I think, last week.
Mm-hmm.
And I should be able to look forward to better trading terms with the European Union. And then America negotiations are still on. I hope they finish them soon, so that we can be able. Some of these things, we are a very privileged country, whereby you find it's only Kenya, which the US wants to sign a trade business. It's only that we need to negotiate and be able to get better terms. The European Union, the whole of East African region, that is, we are the only people whom they want to sign with.
Yeah.
You look at the former agreement with the US, the AGOA, which since lapsed. uh, Kenya was the largest beneficiary through the AGOA business. So if we can be able to foster these things and be able to expand, get more products which are from Kenyans, made by Kenyan industries, get to go out there, we will be now signing ourselves officially into the global trade business, whereby we will be able to get the returns into Kenya, and then we can be able to offset the balance of the deficit. One very important thing where I say that is very important in terms of dealing with our debt. If Kenya shilling changes, I was told this in confidence by certain economists, I don't know how true that is. If the Kenya shilling depreciate or appreciates by 1 shilling to the US dollar, our debt increases by 40 billion.
Oh.
Do you imagine if we start trading with the US, we offset the balance of trade, then the dollar now is doing almost 150. It reduces to 130 times the 40 billion. How much debt will we have reduced just by just doing that? Or if we reduce the debt to 100 as it was like 2 or 3 years back, we will have cut down our debt by almost half.
True.
We wouldn't be feeling all these pressures we are having right now. I was watching today morning the debate which our president was trying to put, a very spirited fight in Paris. And he was speaking truth to power, to the IMF, to the European Union, and the World Bank, and the host president, Macron. I think we got to give to our president that when he wants to speak, he can speak truth to power. And that's something I would want to commend him for, because he spoke things which I think no other president in Africa or from the global south will want to speak. But then also, even the South African president also tried to put some truth to them in terms of the vaccines during the COVID era. Is then you get to realize the kind of political debates happening in terms of this particular debt. For example, the president was saying, if we can be able to stagger, we know we owe you money, but you guys set us up. We are paying 8 times, while other people are paying 0 point something in terms of interest rates. So how do you expect us to grow when we are paying 8 times than what it is that we are? And then we are dealing with the multilateral agencies which have shareholders, which shareholders call the shots. So it's not a fair system. We either break this and have a fair system, or we decide on a particular scenario where we stagger this debt. We get a grace period of 10 to 15, 20 years, so that you give the scenario of Kenya that we pay $500 billion. That's around 500 billion, close to a trillion, to offset debt. If this money was available for us to do roads, for us to do agriculture, for us to do all sorts of things, that's all we need to change our economy. And then we do it for 10 years. We will have enough money to pay these people their debt. And then if we increase another grace period of 15 to 20 years, we will actually pay them everything and we'll be at balance, because we will have already been developed. But guess what? I don't think anybody would want to take him seriously or want to listen to what he's saying because they like us being down.
Down, yeah.
And that's why he was alluding to the fact that we are being set up. It's a
Sadly.
debate which we need to revisit and be able to see how we can change. But something we need to do as African Union is only that some other African countries are so weak or they are so, I don't know how I can put it. They don't have capacity to be able to raise such questions. It's only that Kenya that we have a courageous president who can be able to face these other people and an informed president. It means a lot to have an informed president.
True. So still on that, in a recent interview, our governor, Sakaja, said that he wants to get rid of the Green Park terminus and create a conference center there. What do you think about it? And as you answer it, I want you to also remember the dry port that was being set up
In
somewhere,
my Mayu.
Maimahiu. And we had the railway system built and everything, and now it's kind of deserted. So, and I think it is still debt money we used. Now we use the debt money, and the project is a white elephant. And now this Green Park terminus is also debt, and now we are getting rid of it, but you're still going to pay. What are your thoughts on that?
It's indeed unfortunate. I will want to say that it's indeed unfortunate that we find ourselves in this particular setup, and this comes after every time that there's change of regime. You see, the reason why we have been able not to have simultaneous development is because a particular regime comes up with the projects either to make money, which do not have economic viability, and then ends up when the other regime comes and looks at it and says, "This is not our project. We don't see how this is going to be viable." Then they abandon it. You realize they like the Green Park terminus was a last minute thing close to the end of the regime of former President Uhuru Kenyatta. I didn't quite see the viability, but they marketed it as if it was going to kill all the traffic in Nairobi overnight. But then sadly, it has not. I don't think it even can manage traffic even from one side. So that was a bit unfortunate for us. That's why I think even the current regime has tried to read into whatever it is that they were trying to market to Kenyans. They have indeed found that it's not workable. And these are some of the missteps we are making because we use a lot of public resources on projects which are not meant to work or which are not thought through. Because if they could have used, I mean, between you and me, you look at that setup, you will actually wonder what are these guys talking about? Because this thing does not look like it can deliver whatever it is that they were promising us to. But then Kenyans will always be taken for a ride until we decide as Kenyans or we have we vote in people who really know what it is that they are doing. Nowadays, the government, global governments or serious governments, if I want to put it that way, use data driven where you do a lot of data collection and be able to formulate it and sequence it using the right people. If you could have used urban planners and the civil engineers, the city engineers, to come up with an architecture in which we could be able to kill traffic, we could have had a better. But where politicians only come up with decisions to service their own stomachs, then we end up having projects like Green Park. I'm sorry to say as much. The other incident you have alluded to of the Mombasa dry port is also another very unfortunate incident. Now that it also started to our debt, which we are repaying anyway. So my thoughts were, I guess it's something which we need to be able to think through because it's not much money to take that railway to Kisumu and to Busia. Yes, we are in debt, but we just need like another 300 billion to ensure that this thing serves its purpose to the very end. There's no reason we have something which ends midway and does not serve the purpose. And we are still paying for it. We could be able to negotiate with these people. I understand the debt which was meant for building of the SGR was a commercial debt. If we could be able to renegotiate the terms maybe from 20 years, or we extend the grace period to 10 years, as our president was saying for the other debt, if we could be able to apply the same models and say, look here, guys, we cannot be able to pay for this railway now. We know we owe you. Your debt exists. Let's give us another grace period of 10 years. But then, with that grace period, we would wish that you also expend some more money to us, or we look for other resources elsewhere, and be able to finish that railway within 2 or 3 years. I'm sure the railway is going to be in Kisumu and in Malaba. Then we leave it to because we are also putting the Ugandans in a tight spot, because they were counting on us getting to the border so that they
Yeah.
can pick up from there. So that this whole economic bloc, the East African Community Economic Bloc, is able to enjoy sufficient railway. I like the situation in which Tanzania is doing, because they have already tendered the rest of the railway to the board of Burundi, and the companies are working on it. I think in the next 2 or 3 years, Tanzania will have an electric train which runs from Dar es Salaam to the other border, end-to-end connections. And that is going to change a great deal on the infrastructure setup in Uganda, in
In
Tanzania, I
Tanzania.
mean, and even Uganda, because Uganda will be beneficiaries, and the other sister countries, Burundi and Rwanda. Our plan was to extend this through Uganda to go to Rwanda, but I think Tanzania has already taken that up. So if we don't work on that fast, then we are going to be in a very unfortunate situation. As to the setup in Maimayu, it's sad, but then we need to do better
True.
in terms of implementation of government projects.
Lastly, the bipartisan talks. I want you to answer it threefold. When it was being launched, did you have any hope with it? And up to where they've gotten to, do you feel like there was anything achieved? And now that it's no longer there, is there a difference between when it was there, now that it's not, considering on 7th, people are going back to the streets?
I would want to say that they served whoever suggested this, who was the president who suggested to come up with the bipartisan talks. I think, according to him, because he no longer talks about it anymore, I guess he is at the point that it has served the purpose. So I think he might have wanted to hoodwink the opposition to walk out of the streets for that time, because he really needed them out of the streets and things were tight. Now that he has gotten his whatever he wanted in terms of having the Finance Act in place, which gives him money to go and expend, then he can be able to pull through with whatever plans he has. So for a moment, I think he might have succeeded. That is for the start, and it has served its purpose, because it's like the whole thing has lost steam. You never hear the meeting, you never hear the issue. It's only squabbles of jumping up and down. So you can only imagine that even if they call it off or they drop off, it was something which was not meant to last long. So our hope is to have a clear-cut mechanism that we can be able to solve our national issues and our national challenges in an amicable way, to avoid such appendages like the bipartisan talks committee, which I don't think has delivered much for Kenyans.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming through.
You're welcome.
Do you have any parting shots?
Really, for me, I think as a Kenyan, I will want to see Kenyan prosper. And as Kenyans, we are in a very tight spot. All I would do is to wish well to the president, because if he fails, we also fail. Personally, I don't want to fail. So I'm really counting on him that he succeeds so that I can succeed. So if he needs any help, now that he asked for the finance bill, we have given him the act. He signed it the other day. So let him get to work and be able to deliver for Kenyans, so that Kenyans' lives can change, so that the country can be able to move forward, so that we don't get to start feeling like Tanzania is catching up with us. Very soon Uganda will be catching up with us, and then we will be the ones, the brother who was very sharp now is considered to be not very useful in society anymore.
Sawa sawa. Asante. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. See you on the next. Bye.